It was a rare day off. Danielle Brooks, 33, had finally found a sliver of peace in her relentless schedule. She sat alone on a park bench in the southeast side of Denver, her black leather tote tucked neatly beside her, a thick hardcover balanced across her crossed legs. The air was warm, heavy with late spring stillness. Children ran across the field in the distance. Couples passed by with iced coffees, and the sound of the nearby fountain mixed with the soft rustle of leaves above her. It felt like the city had finally exhaled. Danielle turned a page. She was wearing simple gold hoops, an off-white blouse, and dark denim jeans. Her skin caught the sun, deep, rich, glowing. Her curls were pulled back in a low puff. She looked composed. Not just beautiful, commanding, like someone who knew exactly who she was and didn't need to say much about it. But silence in America is never permanent. A sharp sound split through the calm like glass cracking, tires screeching. Danielle didn't flinch. She looked up slowly, eyes steady. A black and white police cruiser had pulled up 20 feet from her bench. 2 officers stepped out, fast. They weren't rushing toward danger. They were rushing toward her. One rested his hand on his holster, not drawn, but suggestive. The other scanned the area like she was a threat waiting to explode. Danielle closed her book gently, her fingers curled around the edges. The gold on her wrist glinted as she moved. "Ma'am," the taller cop barked, "we need to speak with you." His tone wasn't a request. It was rehearsed, stiff, like he'd already decided who she was. Danielle didn't stand. She stayed seated, angled toward them just enough to be polite. "I'm listening," she said calmly. "Got a call," the other said, "about suspicious behavior in the area. Mind telling us what you're doing here?" She blinked. "Once." "I'm reading," he scoffed. "You live around here?" Danielle nodded. "I do. Can we see some ID? Am I being accused of something? It's a simple request, ma'am." But it never is. The tone, the stance, the immediate assumption. It wasn't about security. It was about control, and Danielle felt it like static crawling under her skin. Still, she didn't argue. She reached into her tote, pulled out her wallet, and handed over her driver's license. One officer took it, studied it longer than necessary, then looked her dead in the face. "Danielle Brooks," he read. "Attorney?" Danielle gave a slow nod. "That's right," he grunted. Well, even lawyers get it wrong sometimes. And that, right there, was the moment. The moment she knew. This wasn't about a call. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about her. It was about what she represented. Confidence. Class. A woman sitting alone in peace without permission. He handed her ID back but didn't step away. Instead, he smirked. "You always carry books that big around? You waiting for someone?" Danielle didn't answer. She simply placed the book back into her bag and stood. Her voice was even. "Unless you're charging me with something, I'm done here." The officer's eyes narrowed. "You're not walking away." And that was all it took, for everything to shift. Should someone get harassed for reading in a park? Or was Danielle challenging something they couldn't control? Danielle froze, not because she was scared, but because she knew exactly how this would look, how it would be written up if she made one wrong move. She stood still, her hands at her sides, her bag still slung over one shoulder. The taller cop stepped in. "Ma'am, I need you to sit back down." His partner was already circling slightly, angling to her left, like a wolf who didn't trust calm prey. Danielle didn't move. "I've done nothing wrong," she said, voice steady, jaw tight. "You asked for my ID. I gave it. Now I'd like to leave." "Stop resisting," the shorter one snapped. Resisting? She hadn't taken a single step. One of them reached out, too quickly. Danielle instinctively pulled her arm back, and that was it. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." The shout came loud and fast, echoing across the open space. A jogger slowed. A woman pushing a stroller stopped. Two teenagers pulled out their phones. Danielle's heart pounded, not from fear, but rage. She couldn't believe it. Not again. Not like this. She raised her hands slowly, deliberately. "I'm not resisting. I'm an attorney. I have rights." The officer grabbed her wrist. "Yeah," he hissed. "And now you've got a charge." The cuffs were cold, too tight, deliberate. Her blouse bunched at the sleeves as her arms were yanked back. Her book hit the pavement with a heavy thud. Pages bent, spine cracked. She clenched her jaw, and still, they kept yelling, "Keep your voice down. She's escalating." Danielle wasn't saying anything. She was silent now. The only sounds were the cuffs tightening, the murmurs from the crowd, and the dull hum of injustice, buzzing under her skin like heat. The walk to the cruiser was slow, public, designed to humiliate. As they passed the bench where she'd been sitting, one of the officers picked up her tote bag like it was evidence. The other pushed open the back door of the squad car and shoved her inside. Metal slammed shut. No warning. No explanation. No logic. Just power. Exerted because they could. From the other side of the window, Danielle looked out at the people watching. Some stared, some recorded. One older black man shook his head and looked away. And inside that car, hands cuffed, knees pressed against the hard plastic divider, Danielle Brooks realized something. This wasn't the end of her day. It was the beginning of a war. The station smelled like ammonia and apathy. Danielle had been in police stations before, but always on the other side of the table. Always with a briefcase, a badge, and her voice as her only weapon. This time, she was quiet. Not because she didn't have anything to say, but because nothing she said would matter here. Not yet. The handcuffs came off, finally, leaving 2 raw lines around her wrists. She rubbed them gently, refusing to let the pain show. But the sting wasn't just from steel. It was from the way no one looked her in the eye. The way the officer behind the desk smirked as he handed her a form without a word. The way her book, bent, almost broken, sat in a plastic evidence bag on the edge of the table like it was contraband. Charges, obstruction, resisting, disorderly conduct. She almost laughed. Obstruction. Of what? Quiet? Resisting? What, being treated like a suspect for sitting still? They fingerprinted her like it meant something, took a mugshot like it could define her, then led her down a hallway that hummed with flickering fluorescent lights and peeling linoleum. The holding cell was cold, not cold like winter, but cold like intention. Cold like someone had turned the thermostat down just enough to say, "You don't belong here, and now you'll feel it." She sat on the bench, concrete with a steel strip in the middle. Her arms wrapped around herself, but not for warmth, for containment. To keep everything inside, because if she started shaking, she wouldn't stop. The minutes passed, then hours. She didn't ask for a phone call. She didn't ask for water. She didn't speak. Because that's what they wanted, to make her ask, to make her beg, and Danielle Brooks didn't beg. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. She watched the clock tick past midnight, her feet numb, her back stiff, her mind sharpening, replaying every detail, every word, every breath from the moment those cops stepped out of the cruiser. She wasn't thinking like a victim. She was thinking like a lawyer. And when they finally opened the door at 2:13 a.m. and told her she was being released on bail, Danielle didn't thank them. She didn't nod. She didn't speak. She just walked past them, slow and steady, like she already knew. They hadn't arrested a woman on a bench. They'd just declared war on the wrong one. The night air hit her skin like a slap. Denver was still, almost too still for 2 a.m. Streetlights buzzed above cracked sidewalks. A few blocks away, a dog barked. Somewhere, a train passed. But here, where Danielle walked, coat draped over her shoulders like a shield. It was silent. She didn't call anyone. She didn't need a ride. She needed the walk. Her heels echoed against the pavement, One step after another, steady, surgical. Her wrists still burned from the cuffs, and her bag, handed back to her without apology, dug into her shoulder with every step. But she wasn't thinking about the pain. She was building the case, charge by charge, word by word, second by second. The body cam footage, the witness recordings, the fact that there was no call logged for suspicious activity in that park that day. She knew the process, she knew the policies, and she knew how to flip them inside out. She didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. She wanted consequences. By the time she reached her apartment door, the plan was forming. She didn't even take off her coat. She tossed her bag to the floor, walked straight to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood there in the dark. Then she turned on the light. The apartment was quiet. Her world, her rules. The walls lined with books, degrees framed and hung neatly, notes and folders stacked on the desk in the corner. But none of them mattered tonight. Not the bar certification, not the courtroom victories. Because tonight, she'd seen the same system she once believed she was helping to uphold, and it had looked her in the face and called her disposable. That made her dangerous. She picked up her phone and scrolled to a name. Marissa Lang, fellow attorney, trusted, tough. One of the few people Danielle actually let into the inner circle. She typed one sentence. "We're suing the city. I'll call you in the morning." Then she dropped the phone onto the couch and sat in the same spot she always did when she was preparing for trial. Not a coffee shop, not an office. Right there, on the floor, cross-legged, barefoot, focused. And as the sky began to pale into early morning, Danielle Brooks didn't sleep. She studied, she planned. She sharpened every page of that night into a weapon, because the courtroom wasn't where the battle would begin. It was where it would end. By 8:03 a.m., her kitchen table looked like a war room, laptop open, legal pads covered in bullet points, 2 casebooks stacked like armor. Her coffee sat untouched, cold by now. But Danielle wasn't here for comfort. She was here for structure, for precision. She had built careers off strategy. Now she was building something else. Pressure. The phone buzzed. "Marissa." Danielle answered without hello. "You saw the text?" "I did," Marissa replied. "You serious?" Danielle didn't even blink. "I was arrested for reading in a public park. If we let this slide, who's next?" There was a pause. Then, "All right, let's burn it down, lawfully." They worked fast. Marissa had contacts. Danielle had legal precedent. Together, they had teeth. They started drafting a civil rights complaint, 42 U.S. Code, paragraph 1983, deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful detainment, use of excessive force, malicious prosecution. It was airtight. Danielle wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to document the rot. But when Marissa suggested going public, Danielle hesitated. "I don't want a press tour," she said. "I want policy change. I want their names in the system, not in headlines." Marissa understood. "Then we let the story leak. Not from us. From someone who saw it." That's when Danielle remembered the girl with the phone. Short braids, jean jacket, standing frozen by the fountain, camera up, recording every second. Danielle hadn't even looked at her twice, until the cruiser door slammed shut. A single glance, a silent plea. "Don't stop filming." Danielle reached for her bag and pulled out the crumpled citation. Bottom corner, the arresting officer's name, Officer D. Kessler. It rang familiar. Then it hit her. She'd crossed him before, in court. He'd lied about a client's behavior on the stand. She'd exposed it. He'd lost the case. That was 2 years ago, and he still remembered. Now it all made sense. This wasn't just racial profiling, it was retaliation. Marissa's voice cracked through the tension. "What do you want to do?" Danielle stared out the window. "First," she said, "I want that video. Then I want Kessler's badge. It started with a shaky upload. The video hit the internet on a Tuesday morning at 9:12 a.m., posted by a college student named Layla Jenkins. Captioned simply, "She was reading a book. This is what happened. No hashtags, no tagging, no anger, just evidence." The footage was raw. Danielle sitting calmly on a bench, officers circling, voices rising, then the sudden jarring snap of metal on wrists. Her face didn't show fear. It showed confusion, quiet resistance, dignity, even in the middle of a public unraveling. By noon, it had 12,000 shares. By 4 p.m., it was on 3 national accounts. By midnight, it was news. Danielle stayed silent. No interviews, no tweets, no press statements. But her inbox, exploding. Dozens of messages from strangers, some who'd been there that day, some who'd lived versions of her story, teachers, nurses, lawyers, young girls in high school, old men who'd long stopped believing anyone cared. They cared now. Marissa called. "It's moving," she said. "They're talking. They're pissed." Danielle didn't smile. She just replied, "Good." But behind closed doors, the city moved differently. The police department issued a non-apology. "We are aware of the video. The matter is under internal review. They always are." Danielle read the statement out loud in her living room, then dropped the phone onto the table. "Internal review," she muttered. "That means nothing." She wasn't wrong. She'd read these scripts before, dissected them in court, picked them apart in depositions. Under review meant, "We're waiting to see how loud you'll get." But Danielle? She wasn't getting loud. She was getting exact. She filed the complaint by Friday morning. Her name on every page, every violation listed with statute, every timestamp sourced directly from the video. No embellishment, no emotion, just facts. She didn't need outrage. She needed evidence. She needed the system to see itself in a mirror it couldn't smash. Later that day, Marissa sent her a clip, a panel of news anchors discussing the footage. "She's a lawyer," one said. "This could get serious." Danielle stared at the screen. "It already is," she said quietly. But this wasn't the end of the beginning. This was the part where power got uncomfortable. And when power gets uncomfortable, it gets dangerous. It didn't take long. By Monday morning, the narrative had started to shift, not from the people, but from the machine. A local news blog posted a headline. "Lawyer at center of viral arrest previously sued city over traffic dispute." Danielle stared at her screen. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The suit they referenced was from 4 years ago, an unrelated case involving an illegal ticketing quota scheme. She had represented a client, and won. But now, the headline made it look like she was litigious, angry, vindictive. They weren't attacking her case. They were attacking her credibility. It was a classic tactic. She'd seen it in court 100 times. When facts didn't scare them, reputation did. The comment section was worse. "Looks like another angry black woman looking for a payday." Maybe she mouthed off. "We don't see what happened before the video started. Just comply, and this wouldn't happen." Danielle didn't respond. She just saved the screenshots. Every line, every smear, every assumption. Marissa called again. "They're scared. That's what this means." Danielle was pacing her apartment, arms folded. They should be. But fear made systems reckless. And that's exactly what came next. She got a call, blocked number. She didn't answer. Then a voicemail. "Drop it. Before it gets worse." No name, no threat, just pressure. Danielle played it once, then again. She didn't flinch. She saved the file, emailed it to Marissa, and added it to a folder titled Retaliation Evidence. The city thought they could intimidate her, but they'd forgotten who she was. She'd been cross-examined by tougher voices. She'd been dismissed in boardrooms, overlooked in law firms, challenged in courtrooms, and still made partner before 35. This wasn't new. It was just personal now. Still, she didn't go on social media, didn't post her side, didn't ask for sympathy. because Danielle Brooks knew something the system never counted on. She didn't need to scream to make the truth loud. The courthouse lobby buzzed with a tension that didn't match the day's docket. People moved a little slower, security guards stood a little stiffer, and the reporters? They were already waiting, outside, cameras ready, lenses cleaned. No one said her name aloud, but everyone was watching the door. Danielle Brooks walked in alone. No entourage, no statement, just a slim black briefcase in her hand and a steel calm that even the fluorescent lights couldn't bleach out. She moved like she belonged here, because she did. Inside the courtroom, the bench was empty. The city's legal team was already seated, flipping through folders they'd rehearsed too many times. A few officers in uniform stood in the back, trying to look uninterested, but failing. They all saw her. They just didn't know what to do with her. Marissa met her at the front pew, handed her a stack of documents and whispered, "They're nervous." Danielle didn't look away from the bench. "They should be," she said again. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Danielle's hands didn't shake. And then the hearing began. Not the trial, just a hearing, just procedure. But the room knew better. This wasn't routine. This was the shift. The city's attorney argued for a dismissal. Lack of evidence, they said. The arrest was standard protocol, they claimed. But the judge paused. His gaze slid toward Danielle, then toward the video footage, then back again. And in that pause, just a second too long, Danielle saw it. Uncertainty. A flicker of doubt. The kind that plants seeds. Outside, someone live-tweeted the moment. "Y'all, this woman didn't flinch once. Not when they tried to smear her, not in court. She's ice." The post went viral. More people found her story. More people looked closer. More people started asking what else had been ignored. Because sometimes justice doesn't start with a verdict. Sometimes it starts with a question. And maybe you're asking yourself one right now. Maybe this whole time you've been wondering, if it happened to her, what would I have done? That's where real stories begin. The first message came through encrypted email. No name, no signature, just a few lines. "I saw what happened. I've worked under Kessler for 5 years. This isn't the first time." Danielle read it twice, then a third time. She didn't smile. She just forwarded it to Marissa. The second came through an anonymous phone line. This time a voice. Male. Soft. Hesitant. He targets people. Always has. But he knows how to write his reports. He knows how to make it look clean. Danielle didn't ask for these people to speak. She just made them feel like it was safe to... And then came the knock. It was late, almost 10 p.m., and she wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door cautiously. A woman stood on the other side, early 40s, brown coat, tight posture. "Ms. Brooks?" she asked quietly. Danielle nodded. "I was on the force with them, Kessler and Nichols. I left 2 years ago. I never said anything because I didn't think it would matter." Danielle stepped aside, let her in. No cameras, no pen, just silence, and the woman talked, for over an hour. About the training room jokes, the coded language on the radio, the quiet punishments for officers who spoke out. How Kessler would brag about taming arrogant suspects. And by arrogant, the woman said, eyes hollow, he meant black. Danielle listened without interrupting. She took no notes. She didn't need to, because this wasn't deposition material. Not yet. This was confirmation. Confirmation that what happened on that bench wasn't an accident. It was practice. And now the practice was leaking. By the next day, her team had a list, unofficial, off the record, of at least 4 prior incidents involving Kessler. All dismissed, all scrubbed, all sealed under disciplinary discretion. But Danielle had something those names didn't have, a camera, and a public, and momentum. She looked at the stack of silent cases and said nothing. She didn't celebrate. She didn't post. She just picked up her file, turned the page, and whispered under her breath, "We're not done." By Monday morning, everyone knew what courtroom it would be in. Courtroom 3B, Judge Harlan, 10 a.m. By 9:15, the line outside had stretched past the metal detectors. Some were there for moral support, some were reporters, some, Danielle noticed, just wanted to see what it looked like when the system got called out by someone who knew how it worked. She walked in through the back entrance. No press, no smile, no tailored soundbite, just a navy suit. Clean lines, sharp heels, a face carved from something colder than fear. Marissa leaned over the bench in the hallway. "There's talk they're trying to settle quietly." Danielle shook her head. They missed that window. Inside the courtroom, Kessler sat 2 rows from the front, civilian clothes, hair buzzed shorter than before. He looked smaller than he did in uniform, and for the first time, he looked unsure. The prosecutor opened with precision. Every exhibit timed, every video cut exact. The clip of Danielle's arrest played again, this time slowed, frame by frame, her standing, her book falling, his grip tightening. The silence in the courtroom was physical. Danielle didn't watch the video. She'd lived it. Instead, she studied the jury box, watched their eyes narrow, watched their bodies lean forward, watched the room remember something it had always known. Power only protects itself. And then the voice testimony began. The former officer who came to Danielle's door stood up. She spoke clearly, with guilt, but not weakness. He wasn't just aggressive, he was methodical. He picked people, and once he picked them, he escalated. Her voice cracked, but her words didn't. Kessler shifted in his seat. The defense attorney objected, tried to break rhythm, tried to paint Danielle as dramatic, bitter, political. But Danielle's composure never wavered, because this case wasn't about feelings, it was about footage, policy, patterns, proof, and the courtroom saw it. Even the judge saw it. Danielle could feel the shift, not loud, not sudden, but certain. Like the way water finally bends glass. Like a door unlocking in a house you forgot had rooms. This wasn't just about Danielle anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been told to shut up and sit down. Everyone who'd been labeled aggressive for asking why. Everyone who'd felt that metal close around their wrists before a question was even asked. And maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. It was the quiet before the ruling that struck Danielle most. The courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the back wall, activists filled the gallery, and even the jurors sat with an energy that pulsed like a second heartbeat. For once, it wasn't just about evidence. It was about belief. And yet, the man at the center of it, Officer Daniel Kessler, still looked confused. Still looked like he couldn't quite believe this was happening to him. When his attorney stood for closing arguments, the tone was desperate. He spoke of miscommunication, of officer stress, of context. He never once said the word racism. But everyone in the room was thinking it. When the prosecutor stood up, her voice was clear, precise, and devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "this is not about a single mistake. This is about a pattern of racial profiling, about a culture of systemic racism that allows certain officers to act first and justify later. It is about how law enforcement, when left unchecked, becomes a mechanism of fear for the very people it's supposed to protect." Danielle didn't move. She didn't need to, because the truth was doing all the work. And then came the verdict. The jury found in her favor. Liability, excessive force, civil rights violation. Kessler would face disciplinary review, formal sanctions, and, pending appeal, would likely never wear a badge again. The courtroom exhaled. But Danielle didn't smile. Because justice, real justice, wasn't just about a win. It was about what came after. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown. Placards in the air, phones raised, not shouting, just standing, bearing witness, saying, "We saw what you did. We believe what happened, and we won't let it be forgotten." One reporter asked Danielle, "Do you feel vindicated?" She looked past the cameras, at a young girl on her father's shoulders, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Books don't threaten, racists do." Danielle answered slowly, "I don't feel vindicated. I feel responsible, because there are people who will never make it into a courtroom, and they deserve better." And with that, she walked away. But the story didn't end there. In the following weeks, Danielle launched a public coalition, one aimed at rooting out racial bias in policing, increasing accountability, and strengthening civil rights protections in city departments across the state. She didn't want revenge. She wanted reform, and she wasn't the only one anymore. Because one video turned into 20. One voice sparked hundreds. One name, a woman handcuffed for reading in a park, became a movement. Not just about police brutality, but about black dignity, black excellence, and the long, slow, painful road toward a system that listens before it restrains. If this story moved you, if it made you think about what justice should really look like, then don't just watch and walk away. Subscribe for more stories like this. True stories about power, pain, truth, and change. And ask yourself, what side of the silence are you on? Because justice doesn't start with verdicts. It starts with voices, and maybe yours is next.